This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. This is the life section of Living Attentively. Living Attentively does podcasts. They come out once a week. There's two of them. One is relating to business, one is relating to life. And the life one today is working on the relationship between employees and customers. Now, that may not sound like life, except that all of us, generally speaking, are customers, and most of us are employees in one sense or another. So it's an interesting parallel to be able to draw them together and see which feeds which and how. My name is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your Voice of Respectonomics, and the Living Attentively, the principal creed behind it is that we need to pay attention to other people. The entire principle of Respectonomics is to reinvent almost, to restate the dignity that needs to be afforded to each and every human being, to restore it actually. And one of the things that we work on in the life section is how we can do this with our own lives, aside from being in the, strictly speaking, in the business context. There are three steps that allow us to build our sense of self-worth. But before we do that, let's take a look at the relationship between the employee and the customer. You see, we think of a customer in any line of business, whether it's an automobile manufacturer, an airplane manufacturer, whatever it might be, big, small, local, whether it's food, whether it's a service, whatever it might be, we think of the customer being treated properly. And we all have ideas of what that means. It can be as straightforward as being thanked for your business. It can be the person who says to you, I wouldn't do that. I think there's a better product over here. Let me show it to you. In other words, you are being identified with better value. You have situations, and I think we can all think of them, of places where we have been treated very, very well. I think we can also talk about the times when we have been treated very, very badly. My favorite customer service story goes back to, believe it or not, goes back to the 1930s. And in that case, there was an elderly lady who was standing by the door of the, I think it was Macy's, the department store, and she was standing there. And she was an elderly lady, and she was standing there looking out the door. And one of the representatives of Macy's realized what was happening, that she was standing there. And he went up to her and said, "May I help you?" And she said, "No, thank you. I am waiting for the rain to stop." "Ah," he said, "let me go and get you a chair so that you can sit this one out until the rain stops." And that's what he did. Now, that was, in one sense, courteous, chivalry. It was all the right words. But it was very interesting. What he didn't know was who she was. She was the mother of Mr. Vanderbilt, the enormously wealthy, what would you call him, corporate baron. And when she told him this, how well she'd been treated, Mr. Vanderbilt called up the head of Macy's and said that he had got an island off the coast of Scotland that needed, the house there needed to be refurbished. He would like Macy's to take care of it, and would he put together a proposal to get this house refurbished? Of course, the president of Macy's said, "Be delighted, Mr. Vanderbilt." And then Mr. Vanderbilt said, "By the way, there is one condition. And the condition is that all of the business is transacted through this gentleman who was so kind to my mother." Interestingly, Mr. Macy apparently said, well, we do have specialists who work in that field. And Mr. Vanderbilt said, I'm sure you do. But in fact, I want the business to be done through this individual. And that's more important. And that's where it went. That individual became himself the originator, the started up another department store. But the key here is that act of kindness, that act of thoughtfulness, translated into an important commercial transaction. Therefore, when we think in terms of good customer service, it's something that reverberates. We tell other people about it. We tell people how we got a wonderful cup of coffee and that the person came by and said, may I refill your cup? We think in terms of those, they're very little things, generally speaking, but they are very influential. And they are becoming more influential because the customer is taken for granted in many cases. And all of this adds up to the point that when the customer is treated nicely, the customer not only recognizes it, but also all the more so because it's actually unusual. Now, you may wonder, what is this? I mean, this rollout of how a customer feels and is treated is fine. Probably we've all heard a lot about it and talked about it and so on. But there is one aspect of this that needs to be, I believe, to be explored. And that is, what would happen in a business if, in fact, under the heading of good customer care, good customer service and attention, what would happen if employees were to be treated as customers? Let's think about that for a moment. We know that the relationship with a customer is transactional. I give them a product or a service and the customer gives me money. There is a two-way street. But that two-way street is predicated on value. And if it's predicated on value, then we should feel the same in the transaction we have with the employees. Employees are transactional. They provide a service. That's the other way around, if you will. They give us the service and we give them the money, the wages. So there's the transaction. And that transaction can be completed in many different ways. It can be completed with grace, kindness, thoughtfulness. It can be all on the basis of what would happen if the employee was treated as a customer. After all, when you treat a customer well, one of the things is that it usually develops or often develops referral business. What an amazing idea to think that if we treated employees the same way as customers, employees would then be in the referral business and start referring back to the organization potential employees. I think also that as you treat the employee, again, the way a customer could be treated or should be treated, you then create the relationship. We all know that good service carries the concept of relationship with it. If you're looking after a customer, you're looking to build a relationship. The relationship you're looking for is where you can repeat the business and maybe increase the volume of business and the quality of the business. But if we think in terms of that, let us also think of what would happen if we applied that rubric, that metaphor, to the way in which we are treated or do treat employees. It's a very straightforward concept to look at someone who's doing a job and be able to thank them just like you thank your customer. You say to the customer, don't you? Thank you for coming here. Thank you for your business. You say to the customer things like, do tell your friends about what we're doing. When we do that, and when we have follow-up, think about the customer relationship. When, for example, you've bought something, it might not be that expensive, it might be very expensive, but you bought something and the organization calls you back a day or two later and says, how do you like it? How's it going? And you're quite often overwhelmed and you say, well, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for calling. And it's a lovely sense of follow-up. We know what follow-up feels like. What about follow-up with employees? What about saying to an employee, hey, that was a great job you did yesterday. How's it going today? You've heard me say one of the most powerful questions we can ask of anybody of a customer, of a fellow employee, of a executive, of any of us, we can ask one question, which is, how is your day going? And most people will tell you how their day is going. And one of the things that's interesting is it often has an optimistic touch to it, a flavor of, hey, it's okay. So what I'm getting at here is that we want to be able to say to the employee how much we value you, just like we value the customer. And if we're in an organization that doesn't value the customer in the way that we are complacent about the customer, or that we ignore the customer even and just think, well, they either take it or leave it. When we take those kinds of attitudes, it mutates and migrates into the relationship we have with employees. Therefore, let's take this idea that we're going to treat employees as customers and look forward to their continued loyalty, their continued service, and also when they say, hey, there's a better way of doing it, or the customer says, would you ever think of doing this, that, or the other, an enhancement or an improvement, whichever it is. That same feedback is precisely what we want to hear from employees. I think we should look at employees and customers philosophically in the same railway set of tracks and find out how we can flow information back and forth that creates this sense of prosperity, the sense of hope, the sense of continuity, just like a railway track, and also that sense that we're leading ourselves into a place of greater prosperity and greater success. I'm Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, your voice of Respectonomics. Feel free to, to call on us. We can meet, we can have workshops, we can have presentations, we can cover the waterfront. But that is our focus, is to bring back the reality of the dignity of the human being. I rest my case.